Hi, Roy here on my channel, Roy Reads Anything. Anything including tales of weirdness and unusual, strange occurrences. So, Dave Brzeski recommended that I give Adrian Cole's Voidal Trilogy a try, and a recommendation enhanced by his gifting me the books. So kind of an offer I couldn't refuse, really. I knew Adrian Cole from his Elak, King of Atlantis collection. So Elak was a character created by Henry Kuttner, or is it Kuttner? Henry the K, back in Pulp magazine days, a sword and sorcery character. Really needed reviving, and Adrian Cole's stories are great, and it was brilliant having them all in one book, which I read over a period. Every time I fancied some sword and sorcery, I'd be like, let's see what old Elak is up to. So those were good, and Adrian Cole sort of on my radar from those, but I hadn't read the Voidal books. But now I have, or at least I've read the first in the trilogy, Oblivion Hand. So, what's going on? It's a set of short stories that originally came out, or almost came out, in various small press magazines back in the 70s. And they make a kind of story arc. It's almost like, here's how the Voidal gets his familiar. So it's hard to pin these into a genre, which is probably a good thing. I'm not sure. In my mind, there's a kind of a current of this kind of story and this kind of world building, but I'm not sure there's a handy, glib name for it. Anyway, the Voidal is a character. He is a fearsome entity who can be invoked in sorcerous fashion into different worlds throughout the Omniverse. Okay, so in desperation, if you've got the right sorcerous knowledge, you can summon the Voidal, who is a strange, ambiguous character. For a start, he's cursed by dark gods, and he also is pretty much amnesiac about, even why that is, and who he is, and what he's doing. So his long-term quest is to figure out his own sort of history, I suppose, and maybe escape his fate. He's supposed to be unkillable, but also he won't kill. But he's got this this weapon, which is the Oblivion Hand. It's like a detachable, sentient hand that will go and cause all sorts of mayhem. So different worlds, different scenarios, all sorts of monsters and mages are encountered. So you could call it sword and sorcery. There are swords, very good swords with cool names like the Sword of Silence. But there's also a lot of sorcery. And yet they're nothing like a sort of Robert E. Howard type of sword and sorcery tale. Maybe a little bit more in the Fritz Leiber, or is it Leiber, wheelhouse. So there's a sort of these worlds. Now this is this tradition I'm talking about. Okay, that's fantasy, but it's nothing like medieval or Tolkienian type fantasy. The worlds are extremely fantastical, often dark and grotesque and full of kind of alarming details. So if I had to sort of plot a trajectory or sort of constellation of things into which these seem to fit, you've got H.P. Lovecraft with his Dreamlands stories, maybe Michael Moorcock, who else? Definitely Clark Ashton Smith. If I was to say one thing, if I was marketing these books, I'd sort of be saying, for lovers of Clark Ashton Smith, try these. They're a little bit less, given that you've got an ongoing protagonist and a sort of little ongoing cast who do survive from story to story. That sort of sets them apart from Clark Ashton Smith, where often people are completely doomed. but it's the irony. That's another thing, irony. I'm not so much talking like humorous fantasy. I'm not talking Terry Pratchett or anything, but I'm sort of talking the kind of irony you might get in a Lord Dunsany tale or Clark Ashton Smith, where cosmic irony, I suppose you could call it, and wit as well. Jack Vance would be another one. So it sort of has this sort of vibe for this type of thing. Is it dark fantasy? I don't know. It's not bleak. It's more, like I said, it's grotesque. It's sort of, I mean, if you think of those ones I've mentioned, like particularly Clark Ashton Smith, you've got a sort of fantasy that actually draws upon the sort of romantics, going back to earlier sort of literary influences. Another thing that holds the stories together is the introductions by the supposed narrator, who is a divinity, who probably, despite his divine status, could be a little bit of a unreliable narrator, perhaps. Seleko, the esteemed of Escalok, author of the extrapolation of exactitudes towards the cognizance of random creation, nascent darkness, our responsibilities, and various other works currently invalidated under the Divine Sedition Acts. So, yes, if you can't trust an academic god, who can you trust? I'll read you some story titles as well, give you a bit of a flavour. We've got Well Met in Hell, The Lair of the Spydron, The Universe of Islands. So do you like this kind of multiverse, or omniverse as it is in here, this sense of like endless possibilities? Because each new story, who knows what kind of thing it's going to be. It's like when people say Byzantine, it's like that, but dialed up to infinity. First make them mad, Urge and Demiurge, The Ocean of Souls, Astral Stray, Ever the Hungry Night. Remember, there's 2 more volumes as well. I've actually started the second one because it was about a library. Who can resist a story set in a library? I'll read you a bit of Astral Stray just to give you a flavour of the prose, which I think is delightful. Threaded through the many dimensions of the omniverse like a wisp of silk runs the astral reel. Its own dimensions are nebulous as mist, often no more substantial than dreams, though the gods know its swirls and eddies well enough. Here in a shadow region dart flickers of light, swift as thought, entities that linger only briefly as they utilise the astral, moving between dimensions or across them. Most astral dwellers have masters and are linked to them by unseen strands of power, though there are some that move rudderless and blind in a sluggish drift, afloat on a seemingly mindless destiny. Imps carry the spells of sorcerers, ghosts bear the messages of the dead, while elementals are at the beck and call of those earthly beings, powerful enough to control their turbulent nature. Familiars often pass through the astral realm, those creatures of witches, warlocks, and other wielders of dark power, who ever seek to gain more. It is said of these familiars that without a master, they are as a man without a soul, or a warrior with no sword, or a dragon without fire. Of those familiars whose masters have perished in some calamity or twist of fate, there are a few, and for them the astral provides a haven, albeit a temporary one, for without a master their lives ooze from them as wine from a cracked pitcher. So yes, Elflock is one of these familiars who eventually succeeds in joining up with the Voidal. So we sort of have, he has his Sancho Panza, makes a nice kind of pairing, helps us look forward to more stories with that kind of bit of a point of view character, I suppose, of someone who hasn't got all the power but is sort of cunning and amusing, and a bit less doom laden than the Voidal himself. As for the Omniverse, the worlds tend to be, you wouldn't want to live there, but then I've always felt that, nevertheless, the idea of other dimensions, worlds, etc., that you can somehow travel to, not in a spaceship that takes a century to get there, but it's sort of, you know, walking through a secret door or something, that's always appealed to me, really. You know, here you've got stories in this kind of massive interconnected set of strange worlds. So yeah, great addition to the literature of weirdness. So yeah, I'm delighted to be in this world of the Voidal with his Oblivion Hand. So a bit of an author recommendation for you there as well. And I gather he's recently turned 75, so happy birthday. Okay, back soon with something else.